My name is Jeremy Muskus. I'm an MSW candidate student at the University of Washington Tacoma School of Social Work. And today my presentation is on reducing gun-related suicide rates amongst gun owners by bridging the informational divide between mental health providers and gun owners. I have been a gun owner since I was old enough to purchase firearms. I also struggle with my own mental health issues, specifically after coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and then definitely when I got out of the military. For the longest time, I refused to seek help for my suicidal ideations and even suicide attempts. I didn't want to get help because I was afraid that if I said the wrong thing to somebody, I'd have a sheriff showing up at my door to take my firearms, or I'd lose my rights or my ability to own firearms down the road. And I didn't see why such a permanent and long-term solution needed to happen for a momentary crisis. Nonetheless, I needed the help, but I didn't get the help. Eventually, I worked up the courage to get help in true VA fashion. It took quite some time for me to get my first appointment. When I did get my appointment, and I was waiting during the time I was waiting to be seen, Initiative 1639 passed in Washington State. Initiative 1639 revolved heavily around mental health and gun ownership. It also revolved around red flag laws and emergency risk protection orders, which would remove firearms from individuals deemed not mentally fit to be owning firearms. After hearing this law passed, I doubled down on my concerns and decided to not seek help until anything changed. At the time, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I knew very little about suicide. What little I did know was based on myths and misconceptions. But I did wonder. I thought to myself, did anybody else have these same concerns? Was anybody else afraid of going to seek help because they were afraid their gun rights could be placed in jeopardy, or there'd be someone knocking on the door to take their firearms away? Or was anybody else struggling with suicidal ideations or with thoughts of suicide and just didn't want to seek help because maybe they didn't know the mental health system, or they were curious as to what would happen? And that's what today's intervention is about. Let me ask you though, would you consider gun owners to be a disenfranchised population, or even a population at all? In 2017, nearly half of all suicides were by gun. That number is 23,854 suicides by gun. A lack of literature suggests gun owners have been overlooked by the mental health community as a legitimate population, and few efforts made in addressing the gun community for interventions. The Small Arms Survey estimated in 2017 there were 393.3 million guns in America, or 120.5 guns per 100 residents. The Trade Association for the Firearms Industry reported 12 million gun purchases between January and August 2020, 5 million of which were first-time gun buyers. Additionally, data strongly suggests that the majority of gun-related suicide is by longtime gun owners and not individuals who are purchasing a gun for the first time with the intent of killing themselves with it. If that isn't enough to convince you that gun owners should be considered a population in themselves, ask yourself, who are the individuals buying guns? Gun ownership in America does not discriminate. It doesn't matter what race you are, what color your skin is. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter if you're rich, if you're poor, if you're housed, if you're homeless. It doesn't matter if you're gay, if you're straight. None of that matters. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican or somewhere in between. It doesn't matter. In the United States, gun ownership, as long as you can legally own and purchase a firearm, you can have one. Think about that. Despite this information, the mental health community has largely overlooked the gun community as a population which should be directly addressed. A lack of cultural understanding, minimal literature, and lack of focus on gun owners when considering suicide prevention interventions are all areas of needed improvement among the mental health community. Anecdotal evidence from gun-owning stakeholders that I recently interviewed showed a general mistrust in the mental health system and community as a whole. due to a perceived lack of transparency. Additionally, there were held misconceptions of beliefs and myths on suicide. Anecdotal evidence from mental health providers at a follow-up stakeholder interview of clinicians showed a general priority of safety of life over an individual's right to own guns down the road, which is understandable coming from their perspective. Additionally, there was concerns of liability and a general unawareness to the fact that current mental health practices could potentially influence a gun owner's willingness to seek help down the road during crisis. For this reason, my intervention is going to be multi-pronged. It's going to be an awareness campaign targeting strategically gun owners and mental health providers in an effort to bridge the informational gap between the two communities. The intended outcomes are to increase knowledge of mental health resources among gun owners and help mental health providers reduce perceived barriers to gun owners receiving mental health services. The first part of this intervention. At participating gun shops, I will distribute informational resources addressing myths, misconceptions regarding suicide and seeking help. I will also spread awareness of a recent amendment to Initiative 1639, which allows transfer of firearms to an individual while in crisis without getting law enforcement or a background check involved. For the evaluation of this first part of the intervention, the purpose of it, keep in mind, is to help spread the information via peer-to-peer. Sure, it will start at the gun shop, but the goal is for patrons of the gun shop and other gun owners to eventually spread this information amongst each other. So 1 month after my initial visit to each shop, I'll return to administer a survey to willing participants via purposive sampling. I will assess the usefulness of the information provided, if it will be used in the future, and if it will spread word of mouth or not, if this is an effective means of distributing information. For the second part of this intervention, I will simultaneously post on 2 prominent social work, mental health provider, and gun owner forums online to spread awareness in a language each will listen. On the gun forum, I will post similar information that was provided at the gun shop. On the social work, mental health provider forum, I will raise awareness to gun owners being considered a disenfranchised population, to their having been overlooked in the past due to not being a traditionally disenfranchised populations. Encourage spreading this awareness and spread awareness on the current mental health community practices and anti-gun legislation that can influence help-seeking behaviors amongst gun owners in crisis. The goal of both these forums is to spark debate, spark conversation. For that purpose, I'll be observing the quality. For that purpose, I'll be observing the quality of the feedback given, the quality of the conversations, if any new threads have been started, how many likes there are on that thread, if it stays at the top of the forum, or if it falls below and it loses traction pretty quickly. That will hopefully give me a good insight as to continue pursuing spreading information this route or not. This intervention takes a person-centered approach by tailoring each intervention to speak to each audience, but not undermine either's feelings of competency or autonomy. Additionally, this intervention uses a systems theory approach by encouraging change on a macro level in the hopes of breaking down communicative barriers between gun owners and mental health providers, for the goal of increasing help-seeking behavior and reducing gun-related suicide. In an ideal world, the gun owning community and mental health community will work together and establish trust to reduce gun-related suicide by spreading this information via word of mouth. Thank you, and God bless.